So if you've gone through the stress of picking out your first camera, what lens, what microphone, what all these different things, then you're probably already stressed because now you need to figure out what settings should you be using. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through a super easy way to figure out not just and copy what I do in this video, but so that you can find the best settings in your environment. So this is my Sigma 16mm lens, and usually I would be using this lens with my camera, but in this video, we're not going to. I'm going to be using my regular kit lens that comes with the Sony a6000 series cameras. So this is on my a6600 and the kit lens. I'm only using one primary light to light me, even though I have my other one on over there. So whatever your lighting and audio settings and stuff, go ahead and get set up and you can follow along. So right now I'm in the movie mode at the top dial of the camera, and I have everything set on a manual setting, which means I pick what each setting is going to be. There's a few things that you want to know ahead of things before we get there. It's that when you pick your frame rate, whether that's 24, 30, 60 frames per second, whatever you prefer to record in, your shutter speed is going to be twice that. And so just do ×2 and the closest that you can get in your camera. So if I'm doing 24 frames per second, the closest that I can get for the shutter speed in my camera is 1/50 or 1/50th of a second, or sometimes you just may see 50. If you're doing 30 frames per second, then it would be 1/60th of a second. Now, this is in NTSC here in the US. Sometimes it may be PAL, so that may not be 24. Maybe you see 25 frames per second and on and on. But we're not getting into too much detail with all of those specific settings because this is not a tutorial to walk you through what each of those things mean. But I want you to know when you set your frame rate and when you set the shutter speed, imagine those will have a lock symbol over them, because once we set it, we can forget it, kind of like how the infomercials used to do. The other metric that we're going to be looking at is aperture and the ISO. And this is going to deal with light sensitivity or how bright the image looks overall. Again, it's more details into that with the aperture. You know, the more open that it is, the more blurry the background is, and you're getting a brighter image. Not to get too technical, but I just want you to kind of know what each of these things does. Just a little bit of an overview. So what I want you to do right now is to put your camera in the movie setting at the top, and then we're going to go into the auto settings. In your Sony camera, you want to go up here to the second icon here, that purple menu, and you want to go to what's called the exposure mode. Now, if you need to set up the 24 frames per second and all the stuff I was saying, this is where you want to come down here to where it says 24 and the 50 megabits per second, that record setting. So that's where you'll set the 24, but that we're going to come back to in a second. So go ahead and click on manual exposure or whatever it says there, and we're going to go to where it says program auto and hit enter. And as you can see, those settings have changed a bit, and it will change and fluctuate as I move and enter the scene. And there's nothing that I can do with it because the camera is in auto. However, if you take a look at what the camera has outlined based on the lighting and all the environments in the space, it's going to tell me that even though the shutter speed is a little bit different, it's at 1/60th of a second. The aperture is at f5.6 and the ISO is at ISO 1000. So if you want with your phone, go ahead and take a picture of this because we want some settings that we can start with. So that's what we're going to start off with, our little bit of a cheat sheet, if we will. Now go ahead and switch back over to manual. All right, so once I've changed back over into manual mode, I now see what the camera is saying, which is 1/60th of a second, 5/6 for the shutter speed, and an ISO of 1000. But I already know personally that's going to be too dark once I actually sit in the frame, and I will need to change some things. But that's a nice cheat sheet for us to start with. One of the things that I always suggest is making sure that you lock that into the proper number. So we're going to head and press the down button on the camera, and we will go ahead and turn that to the left, and that'll change that to 1/50th. At the top right here, the camera, if I want to change this aperture, I want to make that number as low as it can go. So the more I turn that to my left, that will now go to f3.5, and the image has gotten brighter than what it probably looks normal on the camera. But once we sit in there, you'll see what's going on. Let's leave the ISO at 1000 because we actually need to sit in the frame to see what happens. Okay, so once I enter the frame and I actually sit down, then it's probably going to be a little bit too bright. And the way that I'm going to be able to identify that is when I look at the number, the exposure meter in the Sony cameras, you'll see that it's like a 1.3, it'll say a plus, or it may say plus 0.3, whatever that number may be. Now, again, depending on your skin complexion, where your lights are, and everything like that, which I did a video showing you how to light a home office like mine, so you can check out that video. But depending on what those settings are and where you have things placed at will dictate, are we getting too much light or is it too dark? And honestly, just use your eyes. Look at the camera and see, what do you honestly prefer? Because sometimes, even though the camera is going to say the right setting is when you get that meter to 0.0, sometimes my personal preference, and for my skin tone, I prefer that to be a little bit of what's called overexposed. So a 0.3 or a 0.7 or something like that. So now with the screen flipped forward, the ISO is showing at 1000 and the actual meter is saying that it's plus 0.7, which means that it's slightly starting to get overexposed. Now, what I can do, because I know my left-hand side, if I used and press that directional button, even while recording, and you will see the little meter pop up, you can adjust your ISO. And if I drop that down to 800, then the image is starting to get closer to what the camera is considering is more evenly exposed. If I bring that down to 640, this is what the camera says, yeah, we think that looks best. And if that's not what you personally think, use the camera settings of what the camera determines as a guide, because again, this is where you're getting into a stylistic approach or a stylistic look. And so if you determine that you wanted it to be, let's say at ISO 800, and it's now saying 0.3 and it's a plus symbol in front of that, that means it's slightly overexposed. Some of the different parts may be a little bit brighter, but the shirt is not an infinity white. The walls are not an infinity white. The book, everything looks more or less normal. So this is a quick way that you can get a cheat sheet and a cheat code, if you will, for your environment and get the best settings in your space. So now that you have those settings locked in, what you can do to make sure that your camera remembers this is use the memory recall feature on the Sony camera. So that way, even without a memory card in, when you maybe put everything up so your kids don't mess with stuff, and then you want to set up again so that you can record the next time, you can go back to those memory recall settings so that you can check that out. And we'll have an upcoming video that when it's ready, it'll be on the screen.